Good evening and welcome to the March 18th meeting of the Glenville Town Board. Please rise for the invocation and pledge allegiance. Please join me in prayer. Tonight we'll recite the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. Let us accept hardships as a pathway to peace, taking this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it, and trusting that you will make all things right. We ask that you grant us peace and guide us in your will. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Councilman Martin?
Here.
Councilman Pettibone?
Here.
Councilwoman Rosbowski? Here. Supervisor Pettsley?
Here, we have a fairly busy evening tonight, but an exciting one, so we'll get right to it. I do want to announce that the board will be going to an executive session after tonight's deliberation. That'll be at the end of the meeting. We leave this room, we go into another room. You are free to stay. We do not anticipate any further public business afterwards, so I wouldn't necessarily suggest it, that we would come out and do any more public business after the executive session. That executive session will be to discuss personnel matter related to a vacant board seat. So with that, we'll start with item number 4, Town Council reports, and I'll start with Councilwoman Rosbowski.
I don't have a report this evening, Mr. Supervisor.
Excellent. Councilman Murray.
Yes, just one item. I'd like to report that I went to the meeting of the Capital District Transportation Council last Thursday. It was held at the Schenectady Community College regarding their 2040 vision plan for the entire transportation system in the Capital District. And I commented to the effect that there is a growing concern here in our town regarding New York State Route 50 and the congestion that is ever increasing there. And I also reported as to a similar condition on Freeman's Bridge, and particularly at the Freeman's Bridge Road and Route 50 intersection. I commented to that effect. There is an online survey that you could fill out there on the spot. I did that, and I'd suggest any interested resident to do the same, as well as board members. The more they hear from the town of Glenville regarding our transportation concerns, this will affect the short and long-term funding as it's distributed in the region. And as one gentleman told me there from the staff, the squeakiest oil gets the grease. So, well, I'm sorry, squeakiest wheel gets the grease. So, that's it.
Thank you. Councilman Pettibone.
Yes, I attended the Glenville Traffic Safety Committee meeting today at 4 o'clock. We had resident concerns about placing deer crossing signs on Route 50, about stop signs in Glen Oaks development. We talked about the crosswalk at the high school and also about vehicles passing other vehicles on the right-hand side on Route 50.
Is there any indication of when the DARE tournament is this year?
It will be the first Saturday in June.
Same as always, same time.
Same as always, correct.
Mark that down.
In lieu of tonight's busy meeting, I will not be delivering a supervisor's report on item number 7, so if I could take an opportunity just quickly to remind people that we do have, the town has a Let's Talk Business Expo coming up on Thursday, April 16th, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Water's Edge Lighthouse Terrace. This is an opportunity to come and learn about all the things going on in the town of Glenville, particularly related to development, and this year in particular with a focus on Freeman's Bridge Road, which I think is going to be a focus here tonight of discussion. So all are welcome to come. Again, it's 5:30, 7:30, Water's Edge Lighthouse. There are complimentary refreshments, but a cash bar, so bring your wallet, Jim.
Okay.
And then, of course, there'll be a socializing opportunity as well. So mark your calendars. The 16th, April 16th.
Soda's not that expensive, is it?
No, it's not. So we're going to move on to item number 5, which is a public comment period and public meeting to discuss the remedy proposed by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation related to the former Kenco Chemical Company site located at 107 Freeman's Bridge Road. We're excited here tonight to have DEC. This has been a long road. I think as many of you know, this is involvement at least from 2006, I've been told, for the department. We've worked with the department on this for many years and over many different meetings. I want to thank, before they begin, all the work they've done on this site. You know, you often hear that it's difficult to deal with the state or the state agency or this or that. I have found that to be completely opposite with the DEC. They've been responsive, they've been open, they've been in constant communication and constantly working towards a resolution here. So I want to thank, before they begin, Jim and Chris and Rick, your entire staff, your consultants. Of course, DOH is here as well, Stephanie, who is equally as responsive and open. And it's been a really good process. I'm excited about what they're here to talk about. I'm excited about what is in store for Freeman's Bridge Road in the future. So with that, what we'll do is the board, I think, will vacate because they're going to put a screen up, and then we'll come back and continue the meeting afterwards. So Chris, you're on. John, can you just go back? Just these over. Sit back.
Do it on your phone, stay away.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good evening. While we're setting up a little bit, just a couple of things as we get started. I recognize many faces from previous meetings about the former Kenco Superfund project along Freeman's Bridge Road and the Sunnyside Road area. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Chris O'Neill, and I am the DEC's project manager for the former Kenco chemical site. I will be the primary speaker for tonight, but everything that's going on with the former Kenco project is a team effort, including the town officials, the New York State Department of Health, environmental contractors, AECOM, Precision Environmental, Zebra Environmental, and others, the US EPA, the New York State Attorney General, cooperative property owners, DEC colleagues in our Albany office, and many others. Hope to keep my presentation to less than 40 minutes. Then Stephanie Selmer, the Department of Health's project manager, will present some health information, and then we will have time for comments on the proposed remedy for the former Kenco and nearby property, and questions on the overall former Kenco project. I'd ask that you keep your comments and questions until the end, but if there is something that's going to absolutely distract you, if you don't ask it along the way, then feel free to get my attention, and we can at least get the question out and cover it as I go forward or at the end. And please let me know if I'm going too fast through the information, as I will be trying to preserve plenty of time for comments and questions at the end. One last thing before we jump in, we encourage you to submit your comments in writing to my office, even if we talk about it tonight, so that your comment can be captured accurately and fully for the project's comments and response records. So, here we are. This is the proposed remedial action plan, public comment, public meeting. Going on to, we're going to talk about specifically what we would call operable unit 02, which we've called the source area. And we'll get into a little bit of explanation of that in just a slide or two. So tonight we're looking at, we're going to talk about an outline of the Superfund remedial program real quickly. We'll do a summary of past work at the Kenco site, including investigations and interim remedial measures that we've done along the way since 2006. We'll talk about the remedial alternatives analysis and the proposed remedy that we published and have put in the document repository at Glenville Library to make it available for folks to read and comment on. We'll talk about future actions at operable unit 02 and operable unit 01. And again, I'll let you know what those mean in a minute. DOH will have some chemical exposure information, and then we'll do the comments and questions Again, OU2, OU1, and of course the water line, Dave Chisano, who is heading up the water line project on Sunnyside Road in the Sunnyside Road neighborhood, is also here tonight to field some of the questions you might have on that as well. So there's an opportunity to kind of hit all the DEC folks at once here, potentially. So what's the state Superfund program all about? Basically, inactive hazardous waste sites. Typically, we find out about stuff in one way or another. We do a site characterization, a mini investigation, and in this case, like many cases, when you find things in the ground or in the groundwater, in the surface water, it ends up being registered on or listed on the inactive hazardous waste site list or registry. During the next step is a remedial investigation and a feasibility study to find out what's the nature and extent of the problem, where is the chemical, what chemicals are there, where are they headed, and the feasibility study talks about what's the best way to clean them up and address the problem. So that's led us to where we are today. The proposed remedial action plan is the outcome of the RI and FS work. We'll be taking comments until I believe it's March 30th on the proposed remedy. From there, we will take into account any comments we do receive and prepare what's the official version or official decision, called a record of decision, on where we're going to go, how we're going to plan on addressing the contamination that we've investigated. From there, it goes into remedial design to implement, fine-tune the implementation process. So we kind of get a little bit more information, a little bit more in depth, and then we can actually implement the remedial action. One of the things that it's a little note here, the potentially responsible parties get notified along the way in a couple of spots, after it's listed and after the record of decision, to give the potentially responsible parties an opportunity to fund the work that needs to be done. Basically implement the plans that we've developed, or so on. So we get into what is the Kenco site is cataloged or labeled under the hazardous waste program as site number 447039. It originally came in late 2006 when we first heard about it during a property transaction along Freeman's Bridge Road. So there's a spill number associated with that initial notification, the 06 number. The two operable units that I mentioned, operable unit 01 is the off-site contamination, which basically will focus on and is focusing on basically 101 Freeman's Bridge Road south all the way to the Sunnyside neighborhood. And then what we're focused on tonight is operable unit 02, which we've labeled the source area, and that basically covers 107 Freeman's Bridge Road, which is the parcel where Kenco Chemical was located, and a couple of properties south of there, extending to 99 Freeman's Bridge Road. So back in 2006, Lowe's, in a pre-purchase site assessment, discovered some chemicals in the groundwater. PCE is known as tetrachloroethene, is the common dry cleaning fluid. Trichloroethene is TCE, and that's typically a solvent also, or it can also be a breakdown product from the tetrachloroethene. And then DCE, or dichloroethene, is also a breakdown product from both of those. In 2007, the state Superfund program funded a perimeter investigation study around the 107 Freeman's Bridge Road property. And the outcome of that was, yes, 107 Freeman's Bridge Road was the source of where all things started in relation to what the Lowe's investigation work had found. In 2008, the DEC formally classified the site as a Class 2 hazardous waste, inactive hazardous waste disposal site, so that became part of the New York State Registry at that point. In 2009, we initiated contractor work to go ahead and investigate the nature and extent of the problem. And a note here, in 2009 and 2013, we were actually denied, the state was actually denied access to the 107 property for a few years But during that time, it is important to recognize that EPA did have access, and they did a considerable amount of work in a short period of time that has helped us, our investigation as well. So this is where the site is, for those of you who may not be from the neighborhood. Basically, we're at, from the railroad, right next to the railroad tracks on Freeman's Bridge Road, is where the site's located. And the initial problem, or the full extent of the problem, goes all the way down to the Sunnyside Road neighborhood, Greenway and Westwood, Havenbrook, those areas, Harbor Lane. The site OU2 we've identified as the source property, as I said, or the source area. So we've got the warehouse on the 107 Freeman's Bridge Road property. Give you a chance to catch up.
Yeah, it's not gonna get it anymore.
Okay. The warehouse, the big building inside the red perimeter, there's a wooden shed near that. Going further west, we have what we think is an underground pipeline to what used to be an above-ground storage tank location, and that's where the tetrachloroethene, the dry cleaning fluid, was originally stored by Kenco Chemical. Cutting across the property, go back, well, you can go through there. Cutting across the property from the Freeman's Bridge Road corner near the railroad tracks, there is a creek that starts there, runs along the railroad tracks, has an open ditch, and then cuts across in kind of a makeshift pipeline underground, and then that was discharging out into the neighboring property. So how did the investigation develop? Here we've got the darker dots are some of the Lowe's sampling points early on, how we found out about it, and the one right there, just south of 107 Freeman's Bridge Road, had the highest concentrations that they found in their investigation. And so that led us to the obvious, what's next door. And then we also have the blue dots, which are the perimeter investigation that was funded by the state. And then within the red, the blue dots are, if you go back, the blue dots within the red at this slide represent sampling points from an on-site investigation by the current owner and the owner at that time. Then we get into the full-blown remedial investigation work by the State Superfund Program, DEC, and you can see we have a considerable number of green dots of sampling locations, and that's where I talk about the extent of how bad is it, where is it, and we need a significant number of points to really get a good handle on that. And then since 2000,
EPA.
you're all right. So inside the red again, and focused on inside the red, a couple of spots outside, we have the points that EPA did work on the site, roughly 2009, 2010 timeframe. Considerable amount of soil investigation, and we'll get into a little bit of detail on that. Here's the latest draft of our contamination plume in the groundwater, to give you an idea for folks who are interested primarily maybe in the Sunnyside Road situation. This is the current map. It shows the total of the four chemicals: tetrachloroethylene, trichloroethylene, dichloroethylene, and vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is another breakdown from the dichloro. So the sum of all those present gives us that contour map. The highest concentrations up by the site, and a considerable amount in the middle, and then it gets lesser as we get closer to Sunnyside Road. Predominantly tetrachloroethene, the main dry cleaning fluid near the site, and primarily the breakdown product of dichloroethene as you get closer to Sunnyside Road, and then kind of a mixture of everything in between. When we talk about breakdown, here's what we're talking about. Basically, you start with tetra, you lose a chlorine, it comes down through, this is important to just identify why this stuff happens, why we're seeing what we're seeing as far as individual chemicals, but also this is kind of the approach or the breakdown that we're kind of accelerating when we talk about a treatment program for the groundwater and the soil in the ground. We're looking to accelerate this degradation process. So I've mentioned the operable unit situation a few times here. So here's actually what it is. The official definition is a portion of the remedial program for a site that we can actually break down and address separately. And OU2 is the source area, which is the 107 property and a couple of adjacent properties, as I said. And everything else, including the adjacent properties to 107, would be our off-site contamination. That's everything down gradient from the 107 property. Again, in a pictorial format, this is the shaded blue is what we've identified as the focal point of our remedial proposal for the OU2 source area part of the project. The subsurface looks something like this, where we've got groundwater, the blue line, represented by the blue line, roughly 3 to 5 feet below the ground. It daylights in the creek, just north of the on-site building and south of the railroad tracks. We've got a silty sand and some fill up towards the top of the land surface. And as you go further down through the profile, we get into a coarser or medium type sand. And then the brownish, reddish layer is a silty clay, which actually tends to capture or separate the upper from the lower parts of the soils. And below that is a coarse to medium type sand. So what we're seeing, what we would expect to see and what we're seeing in our data is that material was probably deposited, released, lost towards near the surface of the ground, went to the water table, has traveled a little bit on the water table, but it's also, dry cleaning fluid's heavier than water, so it tends to sink even through the groundwater table and through the soil below the water table. And it will actually collect on top of this silty clay because it kind of impedes its motion downward. And so we actually have seen that, and a lot of the EPA data confirmed that they actually saw globules of the dry cleaning fluid material in soil samples down at that depth right above that clay layer. Just quickly, a couple of points to give you an idea. The highest concentrations we're seeing, again, a quick look at some of the data. Highest concentrations, this is shallow groundwater. Highest concentrations up near the building. And then it gets a little bit less as you move southward. And then going further south on to like 99 Freeman's Bridge Road towards Lowe's Drive, it's much less or significantly less. But we also cut across the street of Freeman's Bridge Road, and we've got a considerable amount across the street. So that's why we've got that little jog in our proposal of addressing the eastern side of Freeman's Bridge Road as well as part of this initial attack on the plume. This might be a little easier to make sense of. Again, the higher concentrations up right at the building, under the building, on the property. Gets clean as you go north off the property towards the railroad tracks, and a significant direction of contamination south and southeasterly from the property. In the deeper groundwaters, this would be under that clay layer, silty clay layer I talked about. You see high concentrations right in front of the building, and then they drop off pretty dramatically as you move southward. And pictorially, that would look like the next slide, where you've got the hot spot pretty much right on the property, but contamination that pretty much covers the whole property and then extends off-site downward, southward as well. For surface water and sediment, the key point here is we've got the creek again running between the on-site building and the railroad tracks. And it comes in as clean. As it travels westerly along the railroad tracks in the open ditch, it does pick up some contamination. And then as it travels kind of southwesterly in that makeshift pipeline underground, it gets considerably contaminated, coming out at around 400 parts per billion onto the neighboring property. Subsurface soil-wise, the biggest issue there is we've got contamination behind the building.
Very sensitive to my
Yeah,
question,
right.
apparently.
We have significant contamination behind the building, in front of the building, and some significance off-site, but it does drop off dramatically once you get off-site. So off-site is primarily, as I'll say right now, before I forget, off-site is primarily a groundwater condition. On-site, you have considerable soil and groundwater contamination. To step back just briefly, interim remedial measures or actions we can kind of take more immediately. It's kind of no-brainer type activity, like in the Sunnyside Road neighborhood, when the private well is contaminated, we put a treatment system on so people can drink clean water. Similar situation with sub-slab vapors for buildings, houses, commercial buildings. When you have vapors that are impacting the indoor air of the building, no-brainer, quick action, put on a venting system to protect the indoor air of those buildings. The surface water that runs on the site at Freeman's Bridge Road, 107 Freeman's Bridge Road, we put in a system to collect and treat that. And while we were doing that, we also hooked in a groundwater extraction well, so that we could at least control some of what was going on as far as migration from the source property while we figured out and finished the remedial investigation part of the project. Another interim measure was bringing in the EPA, and they did a considerable amount of work, as I said, in a short period of time in the Sunnyside Road neighborhood, but also on the property, it's on the source property, removing a bunch of containers, chemicals, and doing a considerable soil sampling program. An interim remedial measure it's in progress that started recently is the municipal water line for the Sunnyside Road neighborhood, and we get into that a little bit if you'd like towards the end. So here we are back to OU2, the source area. So adjacent properties south, a little bit east, and then the main property where Kenco Chemical was located and operated. Real quick here, we've got, so how bad is the soil situation? From 0 to 4 feet, it kind of juts around the property and then extends where the pipeline extended off the property. 4 to 15 feet below ground, so basically roughly the water table down to almost the clay, or roughly the clay, is where we see that material extending way off site here towards Lowe's Drive. And then 15 to 25 feet under the clay, the soil condition that we're concerned about is primarily right under the property itself, right under the Kenco property. So let's get into some of what our proposal really is, the meat and potatoes of tonight. Some of the common elements that we would call, basically a site prep type of activities. We're proposing that the on-site structures, so the warehouse building and the shed, the supports for the old above-ground storage tank, that kind of infrastructure would actually be removed and disposed of properly off-site. We would excavate the top 2 feet of soil across the property. Again, this is on the 107 property and a little bit off. And we dispose of that material off-site. We bring in clean backfill for that top 2 feet, be able to regrade it. And then another significant part of the prep work would be rerouting the surface water of the creek so it doesn't get in contact with the contamination anymore. That would allow us to also shut down that interim treatment system that we've been operating since like 2009. So again, we've got the buildings and infrastructure on the northern part of the property would be taken out. The makeshift pipeline for that creek would be removed, and the top 2 feet of soil in that blue shaded area would be removed as well and replaced. Another common element would be chemical treatment in the ground in the properties of 101 and 99, and then extending a little bit across the street on the other side of Freeman's Bridge Road as well. This is basically to address the significant groundwater contamination that we have seen under those properties. This will reduce the contamination that is actually continuing to provide a source for the migration of material further off-site, further down gradient, as it gets down towards Spare Room, Sarnaski Drive, and then all the way into Sunset Road area too. The specific chemical to be utilized would be part of the remedial design. It's typically probably a potassium permanganate type material. And it basically, if we go to the next slide, I think we've got a couple of things. So it basically would be a truck with some chemical and water mixing tanks, feeds in through a small drill type rig, and it injects the material in the subsurface, in the ground. And that material can then attack the contamination, the dry cleaning chemicals and the other chemicals that are there, and break it down as I showed you through the different steps to ultimately carbon dioxide and water. So where the black dots are off to the left of the screen is the area we're talking about for the injection program. And with the small rig and the setup, it's something that we can work around the infrastructure that's there, buildings or other such infrastructure. When we came to the full remedy proposal and evaluation for the Kenco property itself, we used what we call a feasibility study as part of our remedial step. And what we looked at for comparisons of technologies and approaches, first was excavation with off-site disposal. That would go down to roughly 25 feet, or 15 feet maybe, you remember? I think it was 25, right? 20 to 25. And then, sorry, thanks for your help. And then in situ treatment would be the chemical treatment type of approach below that to address the remainder. Excavation with on-site treatment would be similar to what was done on the Cooperage site, the Lions property down by on the lower part of Freeman's Bridge Road several years ago. That was considered a potential option for the soil. We would excavate it, run it through that treatment unit, and put it back in place instead of having to bring in clean fill like the first option would be, and then chemical treatment in the depth below the 25-foot zone. The third option was thermal treatment, which is basically heating the soil and the groundwater, both above the clay and below the clay, and heating it to a point where you can actually get the materials, the chemicals, the contamination that's in the ground to become a vapor, and then collect the vapor, treat the vapor, and you don't have to deal with a lot of soil stuff going on. Another option was to chemically treat, instead of thermally treat in place, to chemically treat in place, all the way down from the soil and the groundwater, shallow and deep. And then the last option was containment, which is kind of a typical, for comparison purposes, from project to project. The first option that we have to look at is doing nothing. And of course, that cost is zero, but there's nothing happening, everything's staying in place. But it's the baseline. And then containment is kind of a typical other option that's applied for comparison on all sites, again, as a cost comparison. This would create a cap at the surface, create a slurry wall to capture and contain the contamination within basically the 107 Freeman's Bridge Road parcel, and then you'd have a groundwater collection and treatment system treating the groundwater that you've then captured inside that wall. So just looking at those options real quick, the excavation with off-site disposal or on-site treatment, you've got the dewatering to be able to get down into the water table from the 5 feet deep to 25 feet depth. That has complications. You're pumping groundwater, you're treating groundwater, you have to discharge it somewhere. With off-site disposal, a lot of trucking going on in with clean fill coming in, dirty material going out. We heard about congestion on Freeman's Bridge Road from one of the town board members already, so that certainly wouldn't be a very good option probably. And then you also have just the fact with the excavation, you have open excavation, you got safety issues, and we know the contamination is significant. We probably have odor issues with an open excavation, so now we're probably talking putting a huge tent over an area to be excavated and having to move that from spot to spot across the property, so it kind of complicates the removal process of any soil. With on-site treatment, some of you may have experienced some issues with the dirt burner unit that they used at the cooperage. And so, first of all, we certainly don't have the open space on the site to do what they did. So we'd be probably off on somebody else's property to even do that. So that complicates things even further. We'll go on to the next one, I guess. So in situ chemical treatment, now we're talking lots more chemicals for injection. So it's not just a little truck thing, we're probably talking a storage tank, having chemical storage on the property or near the property can complicate things. The top 15 feet of that operation would actually be a physical mixing of the soil with the treatment chemicals, and so you get into the excavation and odor issues just like before. And then the other part of the chemical injection process or treatment process is making sure that the chemical actually mixes well with the treatment chemical mixes well with the contamination chemical, so that they can react and actually do what they're supposed to do. With containment, as I mentioned before, we end up actually leaving the contamination in place and just kind of secure it and maintain the status quo, essentially. And so we've got the groundwater collection and treatment complications and maintaining that cover or cap, whether it's clay or asphalt or those kinds of things can be an issue. With thermal, as you can tell, much less downsides that I've identified here. We do have vapor collection and treatment, which does add to a little bit of the complications of the issue. So we have a vapor collection system, a network of piping to collect the vapors as they are generated underground and migrate towards the surface of the ground. Treating that and then discharging it to the atmosphere. There is an energy component, whether it's thermal or from electrical heating or just electrical circuit to heat up the soil. So there are some energy needs, but those can be balanced out relatively easily or relatively well from a cost perspective. The key to the thermal treatment is that the soil and groundwater standards are actually achievable and in a reasonable time frame compared to the other technologies or approaches we looked at. There wouldn't be any dewatering associated with it, so that cuts out the groundwater collection and treatment, just leaves the vapor stuff. And the chemical and soil handling associated with the thermal treatment is basically gone as well. So, thermal treatment, alternative 4, as you come down, you can see, maybe you can see, alternative 2, the excavation options up towards the top are in the neighborhood of everywhere from 13 million to 24 million. The thermal treatment option basically puts us in a $14 million range. And in situ chemical was about 11 million, and just capping it, doing containment would be about 5 million. The assessment of that, it's basically looking at, obviously it wasn't just cost that lends us to the alternative of thermal treatment that we proposed. All those other factors for the neighborhood exposure and impact play a big role in the selection process and evaluation process. For the in situ chemical part, again, properties down gradient, 99 and 101 Freeman's Bridge Road, amounts to about $6.5 million. And we kind of look at the numbers, the surface water rerouting, 100,000. Getting rid of the building, the structures, about $250,000. And then the top 2 feet, about $500,000, getting rid of that material to be able to regrade and work on the site kind of in a smooth fashion. So alternative for the thermal treatment with all the common elements, we're at the $20.5 million cost. So thermal treatment would basically have a bunch of probes put in the ground with a certain amount of spacing indicated by the circles. And it would cover, as you can see, the red property boundary area, plus extend a little bit further to the south. This is an example of what the site might look like as we implement the thermal treatment on site. So we got a relatively flat, stable kind of situation. We have a bunch of wires running to the points that are actually creating the heating mechanism underground, and standpipes related to the piping network for the vapor collection that would be underground and run to the network. The vapor collection network would run to the building. It would also control the electrical components of the heating probes. So in a total picture, so we've got the tan circles all around for the thermal. We've got the excavation work in the top 2 feet. We've got the down gradient in situ chemical treatment, injection proposal. And the rerouting of the stream is something I didn't mention before too much on the figure. So this figure shows rerouting the stream to basically be a protected trench or ditch or pipeline along the railroad tracks. But we've actually also added, looking into it during our remedial design, the potential for taking the stream from the northeast corner of the 107 property and rerouting it basically southward on Freeman's Bridge, along Freeman's Bridge Road to a storm sewer catch basin, which is basically in the next property down from the former Kenco property. And so it's a much shorter operation, and probably we'd be working in much cleaner material. Our Fish and Wildlife Division in DEC has asked that once the remediation is done, that we would then return, either way, we would return the stream to its natural path along the railroad tracks. So any connection to the storm sewer would be a temporary measure for sure.
Where does that stream go?
That stream
All the way to
feeds,
where?
so this is an unnamed, we call this an unnamed tributary, goes westerly, and then there's another tributary that comes down from like behind Walmart,
Okay.
and then that feeds into the main creek, I believe is Warner Creek, just for a little bit further west, and then that loops all the way down and cuts across eventually Freeman's Bridge Road, near
Right,
near
it goes
Maple
under
Ave.
the railroad track and down to the river, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good question. So, next steps for OU2, the source area. Comment period is out there for the proposed remedial action plan until March 30th. We encourage you to submit comments, even if we get to talk about it a little bit tonight, verbally. We'll finalize the remedial investigation report and the feasibility study. Both of those draft reports are in the document repository at the library next door. The record of decision will be put together if we need to change the proposal based on some of the comments we receive. We also have part of that would be the official response to comments we have received. And then, as I said, we go to our legal office and ask them to approach the potentially responsible parties, those that have either owned or operated the Kenco property, and see if they have interest or capability of moving forward with the decided remedy. And then when and if they say, no, we don't have anybody else that has $20.5 million, then they come back to the hazardous waste program and say, you have to go ahead with Superfund money and implement the decided remedy. Then we get into the remedial design, collect some more data, refine what we thought was the approach, and then actually implement the approach as that final step, basically. So in relation to offsite, we've called it Operable Unit 01. As I said, we've got the water line work that's ongoing. I'm told the 2016 completion target. I think that's hasn't changed as far as I know from the beginning. We've had a lot of inquiry in relation to when the Sunnyside Road private wells will be resampled. Some of them have been sampled as recently as several months. Some of them have been over a year. So our target is mid-May of this year to do a full neighborhood sampling event once again. We'll finalize the report for OU1, which would be everything off-site, as I said. We'll develop a feasibility study like we've done for OU2, and we'll develop the proposed remedial action plan for OU1 as we have with OU2. That's probably roughly a year from now is when we'll be talking about the proposed remedial action plan for OU1. This is my contact information. Hopefully you've had that from the mailing of the fact sheet announcing the availability of the remedial action or the proposed plan. And then now I think we'll get into the Department of Health, and we'll invite Stephanie Selmer to share some of the information that they can provide. And then we'll come back for questions and comments.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephanie Selmer. I work for the New York State Department of Health in the Bureau of Environmental Exposure Investigation. We work with DEC as they investigate these sites. Our job, our part of this process is to look into exposures and the potential for exposure, people to be exposed to the chemicals that are on these sites. When I say exposure, we're talking about physical contact with a chemical or substance, as in direct contact, touching it, ingestion if you eat or drink, and inhalation, breathing, such as if the indoor air it gets contaminated and you're breathing that in. One or more of these physical contacts must occur before a chemical has the potential to cause a health problem, health concern, I should say. I just like to put this up kind of to give you a visual of what exposures could be. If there's contamination in the groundwater and then a well is in that groundwater supplying your drinking water, your household water, you can be exposed that way. That would be the ingestion route. The chemicals can come up through the ground into a home. That's the air inhalation exposure route. And direct contact could be with groundwater or soil. If there's contamination like in surface soil and you're out digging in the dirt for some reason, kids even more so, they play in the dirt, put their hands in their mouths without washing their hands. Next one. So keep in mind, tonight's meeting is really focused on OU2. It's for the on-site, it's not the off-site. So there is obviously, as Chris discussed, quite a bit of contamination on the site and nearby. Mostly it's deeper. You're not going to come into contact with it unless you're digging into the ground. And what is there is going to be either removed, as he said, the first couple feet of soil will be excavated, disposed of properly, and the rest of it is going to be treated. And the plan is that will be treated down to what we call unrestricted use. You can build a house on it, you can dig till your heart's content in it, and there shouldn't be anything in it to be exposed to. The groundwater, again, I want to stress that, I did this in terms of OU2, and there is public water. No one is being exposed to contaminated groundwater on site or nearby or even down Freeman's Bridge Road. Soil vapor intrusion. This one goes to contamination for indoor air. Soil vapor is the process by which volatile chemicals move from the subsurface, from either groundwater or soil, and can move from that up into overlying buildings. This is just to give you an idea. If you could see it, if there's contamination in the soil or the groundwater, it moves, there's air in between, like soil particles, and that can move upward and into homes or any building. If there's some cracks or a hole in the foundations, it can get in through there. So soil vapor indoor air is a potential exposure pathway. The building is going to be removed. There's going to be the remediation of taking out the contaminated soil, treating the groundwater, and in the end, anything that is built on this site should be suitable. There shouldn't be any reason for contamination to end up inside that building. And again, as I said, all of that is in regards to OU2. I know we have issues on OU1. If there's questions, I just want to clarify that I'm talking specifically about OU2. So that's all I have.
Stick around in case we have
I'll be
questions.
right here. I'll be right here.
So one of the things we'd like to do, if we can, is because the meeting is focused on OU2 remedy, proposed remedy, if we have comments on that, we'd like to try and do that a little bit first if we can, and then go into overall questions that you may have. Is there anybody that has a comment or question related to OU2? Yes, sir.
Close to the site, is there any medium-term or long-term plan for as well as to monitor to make sure that you've got it all?
Part of the remedy will include monitoring, and it'll include the temperature profile as we're heating up the soil, and it'll include groundwater monitoring, soil monitoring, and in fact, a post-remedial program. Once we think we've got everything done, I believe there's a several-year period of just monitoring groundwater to confirm that we did get it all. Good question. Not seen it yet. Okay.
How long of a period is it going to be after the type of remediation or when it's done that property can be utilized?
It depends on how you define utilized. I'll give you, we've talked about this a lot. I'll give you a couple of, I'll touch on it a little bit. When I showed the picture about the wires all over the place and pipes up out of the ground and the treatment system and all that, that's not going to allow utilization of the site. In order to protect all the material and the equipment that's there's going to be a fence put around it. So once all that active remediation work is done, and we're into kind of a monitoring program, the monitoring can be a little bit more flexible and work around any kind of structure. If somebody want to put a building on at that point, it's something we could work out and work around. And then once we've pulled out of there assuming that we have hit our unrestricted goal and everything is clean, there would be no need to do further monitoring, and it's free to go as far as we would be concerned. So we're talking probably anywhere from, it's 3 to 12 months, or who knows how long the legal stuff will happen. That's out of our realm from a technical standpoint. Once the legal office says go, we're probably talking about 3 years of the design and the actual remedy, and then the monitoring would go on probably a few years after that. So probably, to answer your question more directly, roughly 3 years. Give us 3 years and we'll probably be out of it.
And that time goes back to the current owner?
Whoever the owner is at the time, it could even change hands. We don't have any control over that in the meantime. Yes?
Are you saying roughly 3 years before you can build anything on it again, or do?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I'm saying, right?
Okay.
Well, 3 years from our technical side saying go, you'd be 3 years. So hopefully it's not more than 3.5, but I don't know how long legal stuff up front's gonna take. Yes, Mark?
Do you anticipate any cost recovery dollars?
That's a legal question. We were not, obviously we reached out to potentially responsible parties before we did the investigation part, and the state super fund was used to make that happen. The cost recovery is the other aspect of, typically it goes to the Attorney General's office to get any kind of money back that we've spent, and it's a matter of who's got money that we can get it back from. My guess is probably not likely, based on past experience.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes?
In all the options that you presented, are there any effects that you would think about that would affect potentially the OU1 site? Meaning you're diverting waterways, we're seeing increasing levels potentially, not potentially, we know we are in the Sunnyside Road area. Would any of this increase more levels or divert the potential plume of moving in any other directions?
Actually, we would envision just the opposite happening. The approach on this OU2 and why we were told to focus on OU2 was to basically attack the source. That source is continuing to provide contamination to go down further south and easterly, southwesterly towards the Sunnyside Road neighborhood. So by attacking the source, getting rid of that, the availability of contamination to even migrate is tremendously reduced, if not eliminated. So that's the approach why we've taken the approach that we are proposing. Any other questions? Open it up to, we'll bring Dave in if you want to talk about water line unit. Yes?
I live in the Sunnyside Garden area. When are they going to put water down there? What would that be about?
Yeah, what we're doing now, we're finalizing the design for the water line extension. We expect to go out to public bid in May and start the work. We're looking right now in September. So the line will be run first. That's going to take, they say, about 80 days, a month and a half, and then the connections will take about 4 months to 100 residents we got to connect to. And that's going to take 4 months because for each resident, we got to coordinate with each one, discuss where the line's going, yeah.
My pump is going, that's why.
Yep. I wish I could help you there.
I guess I'd have to buy a new pump then.
Yeah, so and what I do is I have a website. It's on the, if you go to DEC and Google Kenco, you'll see a website. And what I do once every month or so, I update it with the schedule, where we're at and where we're going, and post any documents that I feel would be useful to the public out there.
You say 2016 for the completion of
For
that?
completion, yes.
And that would be the fall of 2016 when?
Well, right now we have May of 2016 demobbing from the site. Restoration will occur, restoration of any properties in April, and then completing in May. Now, the winter months, we don't know whether we have a winter like this, and that will slow us down in May. But right now, we're ready to go and advertise in May. It takes them, you have to advertise a minimum of 30 days in New York. And then after you open bids, you have to send it to the state comptroller's office, and it takes them 3 to 4 months to award the job. So that's the slowdown right there. They got to encumber the $2.5 million, and they got to set it aside for us to spend. And as soon as we get that go-ahead, we'll be starting with the water line immediately in September. And that'll take us to December, about 80 days to put the line in, and then we'll work with the residents to connect individually.
Is that proposal ditch format, or are they going to do, I don't know what you call it, they actually snake it underneath the ground?
Yeah, the connections, you know, we typically would snake the copper from the extension into the house, yeah.
But I mean to the main line, I'm sorry.
Main line's gonna be transferred. Yeah, we're working with the county and the town, working on the location of that line right now, running down Sunnyside. So that's one of the things we're working on right now and ironing out the details. But while I got my 2 seconds here, I just wanted to say thanks to the residents here. I sent out over 100 consent forms, and I got 99 back, all agreeing to the connection, and I got them back pretty quickly without much effort. So I appreciate the coordination and the cooperation. I plan on, what I do is I contact the town. They've been helpful sharing information and helping me coordinate with the residents. I talk with Chris informally once every month or so, month and a half, give an update what's going on. We share information, the town engineer. So we feel we got a good feel what the residents want and what we're trying to avoid when we get in there, make sure they're happy at the end of the day. And all I can say to you is that we're going to work with you as best we can. Before we go on your property, I'll meet you with the contractor, we'll walk the property, we'll sign, we'll plot out where you want it, and we'll sign on the dotted line that this is where you want it. So all I can ask is the patience. It takes time for it to work, and that's the slowdown. So, but I'll keep you informed. I plan on coming back out here again once we award the job, introduce the contractor, introduce the team at the time, and then we'll start, again, going. You'll see us out in the neighborhood.
Who disconnects the pump that we have now?
We would do that. We're responsible for making the connection and hooking you up. That's our responsibility, pay all costs. And if an individual home already has a point of entry treatment system, we'll take that off for you. And if you want it still, we can talk about keeping it. But my job is to disconnect you from your private well. We don't touch your private well. We don't decommission it. We don't take it out. All we've got to do is we ensure that it's disconnected and the line is, you're connected to the water main. So what you do with your private well after is your business. There's a recommendation, don't do anything with it. I have nothing to say about that.
Dave?
Yes, sir.
Restate your full name and contact information.
Yeah. I don't know.
Can you find that easily, Carolyn?
The first name is David. Last name is Chisano, Chiusano. And I work out of the Albany office. My phone number is 402-9814. And if you, like I said, if you Google it, Ken Code NYSDC, my contact information is there as well. People have been great to email me and call me, and I encourage people to do that. I'd rather have them call me directly and not hear rumors, what's going on or what's not going on. So if it's a complaint, bring it on. I appreciate that as well. I got to make you happy at the end of the day. And I promise Chris I'll do the best we can to keep you happy. We're going to be out here for a while, so if I don't do a good job, it's going to make Chris's life.
Oh, I thought you meant that, Chris.
In his. So, no, I appreciate everybody's help, especially the town. It's been great. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
You said you're going to be retesting the residents along Sunnyside starting in May. And I know that the last time that they tested, it took a long time to get the results back. My concern is that it taking a long time to get the results back, if that water is contaminated. And we're in that loop of Sunnyside where our water is okay. Are you going to put a treatment facility in to protect our water until this municipal goes in? Because it's such a short span of time between when this municipal water goes in? You know, what is the plan? Should our water be contaminated is the question I'm asking.
With the proposed mid-May sampling plan, our reaction process will not change from what we've done in the past. So what we've seen, what we have is a situation, you're right, the timing seems like a long time.
Right.
But we get results from the lab in several weeks, but it's not official until another chemist goes through the lab report and makes sure the lab did what they were supposed to do. Now, we have talked with the Department of Health when we've seen those initial results, if they're near or above the contamination level that needs a system, above the drinking water standards, for example, we would talk with the Department of Health and initiate actions to get the systems ready, order the parts, those kinds of things. And depending on the number, if it's greatly above the drinking water standards, we would probably go in and put the system in before we even got the official results. But you're not getting the results, the letters from the Department of Health until the results from the lab have actually gone through that secondary review by an independent chemist. And that's why it tends to take a little bit longer. So I think some folks that have systems now, I think may have been in that situation where we got some preliminary numbers, weren't happy with those numbers, and initiated work towards getting a system in. It doesn't matter when those results come back after this May thing, my direction is, and Jim's going to correct me if I'm wrong, is we're going to put a system on. If it means 2 months, 6 months, a year, especially, again, construction-wise, I've gotten in trouble from past meetings to kind of give timelines. I didn't give Dave that warning. But so if it goes beyond what Dave thinks it's going to, we're not going to say, well, it's less than 6 months, you're going to be okay. We're going to put on a system. All right?
That's my only concern.
Okay.
Understandable.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yes.
Do you return 3-4 years from now and test the wells to see if the project was successful?
The private water wells, we won't be looking at probably. I mean, we've been in the process and we've got some more slated. We've put in monitoring wells on folks' property so that we don't have to rely solely on the drinking water wells for our data collection points. So we'll continue to monitor those groundwater monitoring wells as opposed to the drinking water wells once and maybe I misinterpreted your question. Once the water line's in, we'll still use the neighborhood wells, not the private wells. And then as far as the OU2 remedy, we have monitoring wells that we will be monitoring on that as well. So we've got to keep in between Sunnyside and the source property. That monitoring well network will remain until the OU1 offsite stuff is all done too. So there's always a monitoring component as part of the investigation. It's part of the remedy to make sure the remedy's behaving the way we designed it and hoped it would, and then a post-remedy program as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
According to your diagram, you showed that the water had seeped underneath the road, with part of the plume was to go underneath the road. Anywhere farther down the road, has it seeped across the road?
Yes, the full groundwater map shows contamination on both sides of Freeman's Bridge Road. It's just more extensive on the western side.
Right.
So there is contamination that we're concerned about, and we will be evaluating and addressing on the eastern side as well.
So then will that groundwater be then chemically treated also? Or?
We don't know. We'll have to go through the evaluation process for the technologies as we get further along on focusing on the off-site contamination remedy. We're finalizing the investigation part. Developing the remedy would be the next step. Yes.
What's the possibility of contamination of the air in this OU2 cleanup process? Any possibility of contamination of the air in the cleanup process?
We will have what's it called, a community air monitoring program. We will be analyzing, collecting ambient air samples when we're doing the excavation work, for example. That'll be storing up some contamination and potential vapors. Once we get the thermal process going in the ground, we're going to have a network to collect the vapors before it gets to the surface. And then those vapors will be treated and then discharged to the atmosphere out of a smokestack, basically, or a vent stack, discharge stack. So we'll have monitoring as we go along, but the only real potential for that is during the top 2 feet excavation type work.
And there's preventions, or there's the water suppression and whatnot. They do stuff in the first place to keep
So then
dust.
when they're cleaning up that site from that salvage, because on the other side of Freeman's Bridge Road, the stench was unbelievable. And you would swear that there was some air contamination there from the smell, and they kept assuring us that there was not. But there were days that it was absolutely horrible, horrible. And we had headaches, and some days we were nauseous, and you can't tell me that that doesn't affect your health. But they swear it was safe.
But that's part of our evaluation on this, was to kind of discount that approach and minimize the amount of soil excavation, soil handling that we think would be necessary. Yes?
How deep are you going to go with the thermal treatment?
The thermal will go down roughly 40 feet. The total depth will be defined by the remedial design work, but we think 40 feet, so it's roughly 15 feet down from the clay, would get us in the contamination zone. Anything else? Well, you've got Dave's contact information, you've got my contact information. Stephanie, you want to give your phone number or email?
I have cards if you want them. My phone number is 402-7860. And the email is much like yours, wherever it went. Stephanie.selmer@health.ny.gov.
Thank you for your attention and your interest. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Give us a minute and we'll break down and get your way.
Okay, we return to the agenda, which is item number 6, privilege of the floor. We have one person signed up, and if anyone else likes to speak afterwards, you're welcome to come up to the podium. We have, just want to do a little quiet up there. Jason Ambrosiano, is that correct?
Chris.
And I'm not good with
You gotta pronounce the last
I'm not
name.
good with the Italian names.
Jason, I'll tell you, I've been on this board for almost 6 years, and he still can't pronounce my last name correctly. Don't.
Ambrosino?
I'm gonna start calling you Chris Pretzel or
That's
something.
okay, because a lot of people did, you know?
Well, hello, good evening. Jason Ambrosino, I live on 855 Green Corners Road, and I own Overlook Acres, which is at the, it's a farm on the same area. And I came to speak to you guys tonight with regards to what occurred at Westwind Farms, I guess back in February. Just became a big news story because News Channel 10 released it. I'm not necessarily here to talk about that case. That's going to go to court and be dealt with. I came because several small farms, similar to Westwind Farm, similar to mine, which is just a hobby farm, stressed concern to me. And a lot of it stems from the New York statutes and their vagueness and subjectivity. A lot of it stems from because you've got companion animals, domestic animals, and farm animals, and they tend to wrap all those up into those statutes, and it's a little bit difficult to extract the regulations regarding the farm animals from the companion, which horses are categorized as, and the domestic animals, and there's different levels of care for each one of them. I want to read a quote for you guys, okay? It says, "It's back-breaking labor, 9-hour days and stifling burns in Wyoming, and no training could prepare her for the sensory assault of 10,000 pigs in close quarters. The stench of their feces piled 3 feet high in the slanted trenches below,
The blood on sows' snouts cut like cages so tight they can't turn around or lie sideways. The racking cries of broken-legged pigs hauled into alleys by dead-eyed workers and left there to die of exposure. Well, that sounds like animal abuse, doesn't it? Well, in most cases in the United States, that's not animal abuse. Even here in upstate New York, there was an issue not long ago up in Lewis County where the migrant workers were filmed basically beating dairy cows. Those charges were either thrown out, or they were minimal, or they were ignored. Why is that? Well, part of that's because when the officer shows up at their front gates and says, "We've had a complaint, I'd like to look around," the PAO officer meets them and politely tells them no. I don't think that's where we want to get to, especially in our small community. We're bigger than Mayberry, but that's the relationship everybody wants to have with their police officers. And I think that all the residents have a pretty good relationship with them, and you like to think that you're not going to get tricked into a warrant that's later, issued. And unfortunately, with the way these statutes are written, it's incredibly easy for those warrants to be issued afterwards. So what's animal cruelty of farm animals? Well, we just talked about factory farms. Is cruelty pumping cows full of antibiotics so that you can maximize the amount of milk you pull out of them to prevent the mastitis that eventually occurs because of the mechanical way you're taking that milk out. Everybody's heard of foie gras. I'm not French, hopefully I pronounce it properly. The foie gras, the duck liver, where they keep them in pens about this big and force feed them basically until they more or less their livers get so big that they die, and then harvest the livers. Organic farming, that's a good thing, right? Well, if your animal gets sick, you can't treat your animal for the proper bacterial infection it may have. It might get pneumonia. You can't treat it if you want it to be considered a organic animal anymore. We talked about mastitis. How about things like halal butchering, where the animal's still alive, pulled up, and then its throat is slit and it's bled out? All that stuff is not really considered animal cruelty. So we have to, walk a really tight line here when we're talking about that. And when we get into the free range of animals, generally the general consensus of what you need for a healthy free range animal is a windbreak of some sort. That might be a run-in. And the way the statutes read or can be interpreted is that food and water within a 12-hour period. So we know that in these winters, water's going to freeze. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns is, when one of the charges that talked about frozen bucket of water with feces in the bucket. Well, anyone who's had goats or sheep knows that that's a common occurrence, because at the end of the winter, you've got a stack of blocks of ice about this big that you dumped out from buckets. There's a lack of standards or specificity in the state standards. And that has to be either replaced with some sort of body score or health of animals, something that can pull some of that subjectivity out of it and give some of these smaller farmers a little bit of sanctity that they're not going to have their animals confiscated. The deficiencies need to be able to be repaired before the citations are issued. And that's why I don't want to get into that case, because from what I understand, maybe they weren't. And the reason this is so important to these small farms is because their reputation, that's what they're building their business on. So yeah, you're innocent until proven guilty. But in this particular situation, I will talk about it in this situation, you had the news came and did their report on it. And this guy sells CSA shares, farm shares. So now if he goes and maybe somebody local moves in, or somebody's looking for a farm to buy organic meat or animals that are well cared for, and they say, okay, well, this guy lives down the road and I'm going to buy from him. He Googles his name, pulls it up, that report from News Channel 10 comes up, or maybe the arrest record comes up, what have you. Well, his reputation is already ruined. It's there. Damage has been done. Even if he gets found innocent in court, damage has been done. You can't recover that. So I state that we have to, practice caution, constraint, and conservatism when it comes, and I guess you could add a fourth C there, which is common sense when it comes to prosecuting these guys. And I understand that's not your purview. What is your purview is possibly looking at what protections we can offer these small farmers, or guarantees that it's not going to happen to them if these are the standards that they're keeping for their animals. And that might mean that you have to go up to the state, or we have to look at the state level and say, okay, you're way too subjective. We've got to narrow it down a little bit for local farms. So that's the issues I bring to you guys. Thank you for your time. If you've got any questions, you know how to reach me.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to be heard at privilege of the floor? Going once, going twice. The floor is now closed. We already mentioned that we are going over item 7, supervisor's comments of the board. And we'll move right into the resolutions. But our resolution number 8 is the first resolution. The resolution authorizing the Commissioner of Public Works to purchase one vehicle for Highway Department. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Moved in second. Any discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, this is a resolution to replace a 1997 Ford F-350 that exists in the highway vehicle fleet. Commissioner of Public Works has developed a request for proposals intended to yield suitable replacement options for said 1997 Ford F-350. You may also utilize contract pricing made available through the state of New York to purchase a vehicle to replace this 1997 Ford 350. Therefore, this resolution would provide him the ability to purchase one vehicle to be used primarily by the Highway Department, provided that it meets the requirements stated in the RFP, and also provided that the total cost does not exceed $25,000, with the expense for the vehicle charged to the equipment line as adopted in the 2015 budget.
Thank you. Any questions?
It would also, this resolution will also allow the 1997 Ford F-350 to be deemed surplus property to be disposed of in the most cost-effective manner.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? One question I have is, have the bids come back yet, Tom?
No, they're back next week. We also probably bid that CVP state contract cost.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Tetlavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Ketzley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution, Resolution 9, authorizing the Commissioner of Public Works to purchase one vehicle to be used primarily by the Engineering Department. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, this resolution is in connection with a 2004 Ford Ranger that has been used by the town of Glenville engineering staff to regularly inspect sites located throughout the town. This vehicle requires extensive repairs, so this resolution would authorize the Commissioner of Public Works to purchase one vehicle to be used primarily by the engineering department, provided that it meets the requirements of the request for proposal that will be submitted, and also provided the total cost does not exceed $20,500. The expense for this vehicle would be charged to the equipment line in the 2015 adopted budget. This resolution would also allow the 2004 Ford Ranger that is being replaced to be deemed surplus and eligible for disposal in the most cost-effective manner.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Tetlavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Ketzley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution 10, declaring any damaged or obsolete office equipment or furniture surplus is surplus and obsolete for disposal. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Just for discussion, as I mentioned, obviously from time to time we see equipment and both computer and office and furniture, a variety of things become obsolete, and the town can no longer utilize them, and they often have no monetary value. So this resolution would deem those surplus, declare those surplus, and would authorize the town comptroller to dispose of these properties in the most efficient manner possible. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next, resolution 11, ratifying a MOA between the town and the CSEA. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Moved and second. Any discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, because this is a little bit of a complicated resolution, I am going to read it. I don't generally, but just to make sure that the details are properly explained. Howard Conover was appointed to the position of maintenance helper full-time on March 2nd, 2015. The CSEA Town Hall Bargaining Unit filed an improper practice charge with the New York State Public Employee Relations Board regarding an allegation the town unilaterally assigned bargaining unit work that was alleged to have been performed exclusively by employees in the maintenance helper title. The town and CSEA have met and discussed the improper practice charge and the job duties of the maintenance helper title. The town and CSEA have agreed to define their understanding of the duties of the maintenance helper title and establish an appropriate salary schedule for the full-time 40-hour title consistent with the hourly rate of the part-time title and resolve the improper practice charge with a memorandum of agreement, a copy of which would be attached to the resolution. The attorney for the town recommends that the town board ratify the execution of the MOA and adjust the salary schedule of maintenance helper as provided in the MOA. This resolution would allow the town board to ratify the memorandum of agreement between the town and CSEA, thereby resolving the pending improper practice charge currently pending. It also would allow us to agree to revise the salary of Howard Conover of 3 James Street, Scotia, New York, for the position of maintenance helper full-time, effective March 10th, 2015, to the new starting rate for such title of $33,030.40 per year, with benefits as determined by the CSEA of the town.
Thank you. And so his previous salary was what? Do you know?
It was lower.
1588 part-time, and this puts it at 1588 for full-time as opposed to dropping it down to about 1391 for full-time.
It just brings it in line with what it was. As part-time.
It's the same hourly rate, but for 40 hours, where the old schedule made it appear that you were only getting 35 hours.
It was an annual difference of about $4,000 from 29 and change to the 33.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution, resolution 12, ratifying yet another MOA between the town and the CSEA. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor, I'll read mine also. The CSEA Town Hall Bargaining Unit has filed an improper practice with the New York State Public Employees Relations Board regarding an allegation that the town had unilaterally assigned bargaining unit work that was alleged to have performed exclusively by the employees in the dog control officer's title. The town and the CSEA have met and discussed the improper practice and the job duties of the dog control officer title. And the town and the CSEA has agreed to define their understandings of the duties of the dog control officer part-time title and to establish training for the part-time dog control officers so that those individuals can perform the late registration and failure to register dog notification functions and resolve the improper practice with a memorandum of agreement, a copy of which is attached. The attorney for the town recommends that the town board ratify the execution of the MOA, and therefore I am requesting that the town board ratify that memorandum of agreement with the CSEA, therefore resolving the pending improper practice charge currently pending before PERB.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next, resolution 13, authorizing the supervisor to enter an agreement with National Grid. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, this resolution is in connection with work that the town proposes to do within Mallow Park. National Grid desires a permanent easement from the town of Glenville within Mallow Park, and they need to relocate a primary electrical distribution line from Glenville to Rotterdam. via directional underground road across the Mohawk River. They've agreed to assist us in development of Mohawk Park by performing a directional bore to accommodate a secondary electrical service for a future location of a pavilion at no cost to the town. The terms and condition of the work are set forth in an agreement that is entitled Park Electrical Investigation and Boring Work Agreement prepared by National Grid. This resolution would allow the supervisor, that would be you, to authorize the proposed agreement on behalf of the town of Glenville, such agreement being contingent upon the town completing its required archaeological investigation on or before October 16th.
Excellent. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution, resolution 14, approving the town department monthly reports for February 2015. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Moved in second. Any discussion, changes, deletions? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution, resolution 15, approving the town board minutes for February 28, 2015. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Moved in second. Any discussion, changes?
I would just note that absent were Councilman Martin and Will
Oh,
on the February 18th. So we do still have a quorum to vote on.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Abstain?
Councilman Pittavani?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. Next resolution 16, approving the town board minutes for March 4th, 2015. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Moved in second, and any changes, and you see we also had an absent from that meeting as well, Councilman Pittavani. Any changes, deletions? Seeing none, please record the vote.
Councilman Martin?
Yes.
Councilman Pittavani?
Abstain?
Councilwoman Wozzachowski?
Yes.
Supervisor Pettsley?
Yes, resolution passes. So we're on to item 17, new business for the town board. I'll start on my left, Councilwoman Wozzachowski.
Have a
New
business.
business. Councilman Martin.
Just one item. I've gotten a couple of requests from people on my street about the amount of speed occurring. People driving through the neighborhood. It helps when the speeds indicator is put up temporarily. I was hoping something like that could be done, or maybe some more patrols.
Talk to the man next to you there.
Those are,
Traffic safety.
those are things that we do with the Traffic Safety Board.
Okay.
Which was at 4 o'clock today.
Oh, my timing is impeccable. But, well, the next traffic safety board then.
Two
Yeah.
months, actually.
Banker Avenue especially, there's the one curve there, a couple houses down.
We
It's.
have a
it's-
report on Banker Avenue, I can supply you with that.
Yeah,
You're not the first.
yeah, just passing that along.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilman Pittavani.
No new business.
Excellent. We'll have no new business. I mentioned earlier that we'll be going to an executive session momentarily to discuss a personnel matter related to the open board seat. We don't anticipate coming out with any new business, so you're welcome to stay if you like, but we probably will not have any new business coming out after that, public business. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for executive session.
I'll move it.
Second?
Second?
Moved in second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Executive session.